they give Remdesivir. That's the protocol for all the hospitals. So this is happening, has been happening around the country, even though we knew Remdesivir was causing severe kidney disease. Now, we've known this for a couple of years, almost since the very beginning. I wrote a new article yesterday, actually, regarding two lawyers who have filed lawsuits in Fresno County Superior Court of California. They're suing 3 medical centers in Fresno on behalf of 14 families whose children, loved ones, or parents died in their hospitals. And they are alleging in this lawsuit that they died due to hospital COVID protocol, specifically a combination of Remdesivir, brand named Veklury, food and fluid deprivation, and even a psychiatrist would come in and say that they were uncooperative, and so they had to sedate them. They would give them high doses of morphine. They allege that even some of these victims refused Remdesivir and still were administered it. Can you imagine? Can you even imagine? I saw a press conference on video of the the 2 attorneys who are doing this, Dan Watkins and Michael Hamilton. You can tell that they feel that something must be done about this, that we cannot allow the institutions and even the healthcare workers who did this to get away with it. According to the lawsuit, the motive for this deadly protocol was what they were calling bounty, which is, you basically get $500,000 if you ventilate a COVID patient, on average, they were saying, and between $100,000 and $200,000 if you admit them. If you just treat somebody with like a cheap therapeutic and send them on their way, it's like you still get to bill $3,200 according to these attorneys, but it's certainly not $500,000. I couldn't find the actual lawsuit. I actually went on the Fresno Superior Court website, and they're supposed to have case files, and it was so weird. But that page was not working. So I tried to get in a bunch of different ways, and whoops, 404 right there, big fat 0. But the Epoch Times did talk to the attorneys, and the attorneys described their lawsuit in the press conference. So that was how I was able to find out these things that they allege. So keep your eye on that, because Dan Watkins, seems like the main attorney, is saying that, right now they've just filed suit against the 3 institutions, but he said more will be coming, naming individuals. It's really hard to wrap your mind around how anything that's made as a pharmaceutical medicine could do such harm, and yet there's this disconnect. Like, it's still on the website of the National Institutes of Health as a recommended treatment for COVID. This is all in my article, but I might as well talk about it. Maybe there's a little more insight I can give, or maybe I can motivate you to read the whole thing. I got a lot of links in that article documenting what I'm about to tell you. Welcome if you're just joining. I'm talking about the lawsuit filed against 3 medical centers in Fresno County, California, for wrongful death and medical malpractice, medical deception, elder abuse, and battery. They give Remdesivir. That's the protocol for all the hospitals. So this is happening, has been happening around the country, even though we knew Remdesivir was causing severe kidney disease. Now, we've known this for a couple of years, almost since the very beginning. We've also known about therapeutics that had 100% success rate in France, and we had elite media lying and exaggerating about this drug because it had been brought up by the then president, 45. And so the lawsuit alleges that the therapeutics that worked were kept from the patients for the same reason, essentially, for that big payout. So I go over how Remdesivir was an experimental drug. There was an Ebola breakout in 2014. And then when they had another one in the Congo in 2018, they used patients who had tested positive for Ebola, if you can even believe it, because from when I read the hot zone, it's like, you get Ebola and you turn into alien and something pops out of your chest. I mean, it's crazy, but whatever. It has a much higher fatality rate than anything resembling COVID. But they did a clinical trial where they didn't give people the drug they were testing, which is considered unethical by at least one prominent virologist to do that during an outbreak. Remdesivir was being tested with 3 other drugs, and remdesivir caused deaths of the most people in that trial in the Congo. They had the highest death rate of the people in the study. They actually had to kick remdesivir out of that study, that Ebola study, before it was finished. So you say, right? Logical, you say. So why wasn't even in the running, right? Because somebody decided to try it on monkey cell lines in the lab and see if remdesivir inhibited SARS-CoV-2. I mean, they did it right away. And I was actually hopeful about remdesivir in the beginning because I found a study in the New England Journal of Medicine about the very first patient who came to, he came to Seattle actually from Wuhan and presented and as ill, and the paper claimed that the remdesivir got him better. But I actually think, obviously that wasn't a randomized controlled study because it was just an informational study with one patient. It was a man, a 35-year-old man. And I'm inclined to think now that he got better in spite of remdesivir. They gave him an antibiotic as well. Now, people think, I always thought as a child that antibiotics, you don't prescribe that for a virus. Doctors often will say that. And in more recent years, they would prescribe a steroid. And so I think he got a corticosteroid. And the thing about antibiotics is what happens is antibiotics take care of opportunistic bacteria so that the immune system can then concentrate more on the virus. We have all kinds of bacteria in our bodies at all times. We even have strep in our bodies. When I heard that, I was like, everything you've ever learned about modern medicine and the common cold is all of a sudden turned upside down. But yeah, the whole key is an overgrowth of these bacteria or viruses. That's where we become imbalanced and then we become ill. Back to this lawsuit though, in my article, I go very deeply into how hydroxychloroquine was buried, and I compare the double standard of how remdesivir, any side effect was completely ignored, right? The kidney problems, needing transplants because of remdesivir, very common. Even the clinical trials admitted that the adverse kidney events were very common in remdesivir. So the media did not care about that. It's like, oh no, this is a regular drug, like the ones they advertise on TV. They give you the minor side effects, and then they give you the major side effects, like cancer. And this is how you know that those are the major side effects. They'll say, ask your doctor if Veklury is right for you. Could cause stroke, blood clots, Do you remember that wording? Well, that's how you find out what the major side effects are when they say, maybe it's not right for you then. Well, remdesivir seemed like it was right for everyone, but who knows? Ask your doctor. But hydroxychloroquine, an anti-malaria drug, has been used in Africa so commonly and so effectively, they call it Sunday because they take the pill once a week. All of a sudden, it becomes this horrible, evil thing that's killing people who are taking part in the hydroxychloroquine trials. If anybody bothered to look, which I did, and so did several other people once they started realizing what was going on, some medical professionals looked into it, they all overdosed the patients with hydroxychloroquine or chloroquine, which is similar. They overdosed them. They gave them like 5-10 times the dose that anybody would take. And they also conducted this study on patients who were already quite ill, which, as we know, early treatment saves lives. I've actually known this since April 2020. I'm excited that there's a lawsuit because I'm hoping that now people will go back over the stuff that I already talked about and that I knew 2.5 years ago and see it in a different light. So that's why I want you to look at my article at back2facts.com and see the links that I have linked to, and you will see the whole picture. There have been books written about this. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. wrote a book called The Real Anthony Fauci. He documents the basically the character assassination of hydroxychloroquine. I don't even go into ivermectin, but we know the same thing was being just rammed down our throat for a very long time. But keep your eye on that. And there's a non-profit that is funding these lawsuits. It's called Truth for Health. So truthforhealth.org. There are 501c3s, so I'm sure any help they could get would be awesome. And another thing is, I want to do a follow-up article on the poor patients who died in those hospitals who didn't have to die. I was on Truth Social this morning. Family members are telling their stories on there. How their mother or their brother or their sister were trying to tell them that they wouldn't let them leave the hospital. And they would also move their phone just out of reach. They would move their phone away. That's what the lawsuit alleges. So it's just really, really, really sad. I don't know how a fellow American healthcare provider could deliberately do some of the things they're being accused of. But if you follow Nurse Erin Olszewski, she wrote a book and she was shocked, but all the nurses in this one hospital in Elmhurst in Queens, New York, people were out in the hallway, older people, homeless people, whoever they could bring in, dying on ventilators, not even being given basic corticosteroids, being given nothing, basically. So it was a similar scenario to the hospitals in Fresno. And remember, Elmhurst was actually one of the only hospitals that was actually overflowing and where they had body trucks, refrigerator trucks outside, and so everybody was freaking out. Like, I had a friend in New York who took a picture for me. I don't know if he was by Elmhurst, but there were the public hospitals where Medicaid patients would go. And the same thing happened in Los Angeles. Hispanics were dying of COVID in far, far, far greater numbers than African Americans and whites. And that was because those hospitals are concentrated downtown. Whatever it is, I think that, Erin Olszewski, the nurse, she saw firsthand how people can convince themselves that there's nothing they can do, especially if it's a culture in the hospital, and especially if you think that there's no cure, there's no treatment. There's no treatment. Remember how often they would say there's no treatment? Thanks, friends, for watching. Don't forget to tap that subscribe button and the bell for notifications so you never miss a new video.